Okay, good morning, everybody. I appreciate you joining me today. I appreciate the opportunity to tell you about Renforth Resources. It's traded on the CSE, the symbol's RFR. We're in the process. We also trade on Frankfurt for those in Europe. And we have an OTC listing in the States, which we're in the process of actually upgrading to a OTC QB listing. There we go. Move my picture. Last time I messed this up, I couldn't draw. So, Renforth, we've recently changed. We recently changed our logo, if you saw it before. We did this change to reflect our Surimeau property, which was a discovery we made, which grew. It was not anticipated, as discoveries are not. And it now brings a neat new facet to Renforth. However, we're still backed by our flagship asset, which is our Parbec open pit gold deposit, contiguous to the Canadian Malartic Mine, as John mentioned. So, you're duly cautioned. And you can find this presentation actually on Renforth's website along with some other stuff. But why do I feel Renforth is a good company for everyone to have some exposure to? The phrase I've been using for a while is the right rocks at the right time in the right location. We hold now gold, which is always a great asset to hold, along with a battery metals property in Surimeau. So that gives us an exposure to a broader range of commodities. We're no longer solely reliant on the price of gold. We have nickel, we have copper, and we have zinc at Surimeau in an ultramafic, which is nickel bearing, combined with a VMS, which is copper zinc bearing, presenting a fairly unique deposit style, which has its model in the Outokumpu camp in eastern Finland. So all of our assets are wholly owned. You can see them listed here. We have a bulk of gold assets as well as our polymetallic. Now, we're very active this year. We're well backed. As John mentioned, we sold our New Alger property last year, and we also did a private placement with the purchaser of New Alger, with Radisson, whereby they invested at 13.5 cents in shares of Renforth. So Radisson is our largest shareholder with 24 million shares, and as a result of the sale of New Alger, we hold 12 million shares of Radisson. So that gives us some great financial backing, along with our cash balance, which I believe as of today, if I had to give you a number, it's going to be approximately $2.6 million in cash. And ultimately, we're backed by the gold in the ground at Parbec. So our plans this year, this outline takes you up to June-ish. We did do a maiden drill program on our Surimeau. I just made a dot I didn't mean to make, sorry. We did a maiden drill program on our Surimeau property. We will be following up on that with some drilling after we conclude our ongoing drilling program at our Parbec property. Last fall, we started a 15,000 meter program at Parbec. This quarter, we're drilling off the remaining 5,000 meters of that program. We've got 19 holes planned, and we just finished the 7th hole during the night last night. So we will do our drilling at Parbec, then the drill will circle back to Surimeau. I expect that will commence at some point in March. And then upon completion, we will redo the geological model at Parbec and restate the resource. That'll take us well into May, June at Parbec. Malartic West, we have a beat mat. We're going to get out with some geologists to try and get a handle on where our copper-silver discovery on surface is actually going, because we have no relevant geophysical data. And we might do some prospecting drilling on that. That's a to be determined. Nixon Bartleman, we want to get back there and do some prospecting this year. And Dename Pershing is currently under option to O3, so they're in charge of working that very large property as they earn their interest. Self-funded. And this makes us fairly unique, I think. We're sitting with a good amount of cash and securities on hand. And ultimately, we're backed by the golden ground at Parbec, and I fully expect that resource number to increase on the basis of the resource recalculation. The 15,000 meters we're drilling is in addition to the already existing 40,000 meters of drilling. So we're drilling a good chunk, and we're twinning some historic holes, as we'll discuss later, to bring that data back in. Contingent future payment if Radisson achieves certain milestones as well. So we have no obligations on any properties outside of regular claim maintenance. The largest cash component is contractors, myself and the CFO. However, annually we take shares and payments, so our interests are absolutely aligned with shareholders. And we can stretch a dollar pretty far. We have a track record of doing so. So, Malartic area. We are in Malartic, and we are beside the Canadian Malartic Super Pit is right here. This shows our Parbec deposit right there. Just a wee little guy sitting on 1.8 kilometers of the Cadillac Break. Our Surimeau property, this is a beast. Oh, stop drawing. This is 215 square kilometers, and it's got more than 50 kilometers of geophysical anomalies aligned with geological intrusives, aligned with historic and our own information about metals contained therein. So that's exciting. And then Malartic West, up here, we made a copper-silver discovery and traced it on surface over about 165, 75 meters. And we have to do follow-up work there. So as you can see, we're nestled right up tight to our neighbor, Canada's largest gold mine, held by Agnico, Eagle, and Yamana. And the Cadillac Break runs right through there and does that. So we're in proximity to the Cadillac Break, which is Canada's most prolific gold structure and a huge fault. So there we go. We color code our properties, make them a little bit easier to see. And the interesting thing to note is all this yellow is our big boy neighbor, which is Agnico Eagle. Their LaRonde mine is right here. The former Lapa mine is right there. It's closed now. And then we've got the Canadian Malartic Mine, which they jointly own with Yamana. Yamana just recently purchased the Camflo mill with its associated small gold deposits, as well as a property west of Rouyn-Noranda. So Yamana has become a player in the camp. And then over here we have IM Gold with their Westwood mine, which has got its own challenges right now. It's currently, and I believe still, shut down due to underground seismic incidents, but they are endeavoring to keep their mill running with ounces they can access in the vicinity. So this leaves our little surface gold deposit very well positioned. These guys need ounces. LaRonde life of mine is approaching, and these guys are about to go underground in the next couple of years, so they'll need to keep their mill running while they do so. So it's an exciting time to be where we are. You can see, as I said, Parbec gold, Malartic West, the copper silvers in the top of the property. Surimeau does have gold in the central part of the property, but it's got the base metals polymetallic that we're excited about. So nickel at Surimeau. Nickel, along with copper, zinc, and other typical VMS mineralization. It's an interesting metals package. It's one that we're definitely moving towards having a significant need for in our world. We are near the Cadillac Break, but we're also near civilization. The Cadillac Break runs right through a couple towns. We are south of Cadillac, Quebec, by approximately 20 kilometers, and we're just south of Malartic as well. So we have determined we do have a VMS, which is also running in conjunction with an ultramafic that's nickel bearing. Dr. Jim Franklin can see that we have two separate mineralizing events in our data. We are looking at a property that is very large with a fair bit of potential. We have the northern anomaly goes right through here. It ends on the adjacent, right here is, don't forget, the Canadian Malartic property. So the northern anomaly ends on Canadian Malartic. Our portion of it's approximately 30 kilometers long. The central anomaly right here, it ends, it's on our property for about 20 kilometers. And then in the south, we have this little guy here. which has the Fouillac showing. So what's interesting here, and what we did, was we've got our hands on a whole bunch of historic showings. In the Northwest, we have the old Surimeau showing. We haven't actually visited that one yet, but we have visited Lalonde right here, and we've done gold prospecting in the center portion of the property, and we can't go on our neighbor's property. So that's our 30 kilometers up here. The band we're focused on the most is the central band, which in the east, it has Colony, which we've visited. And then we've got Victoria West, which is the area we did our work, our drilling. Fouillac down here is a historic showing as well. But it's interesting that these three showings we have visited, we've done our own verification work, leading us to treat the historic data as indicative and to some degree reliable. So this system is vast. This is a big system. Take a lot of work, a lot of potential to grow it and increase what we hold. And we do have the financial wherewithal to do that work. Here we go. We can see where we drilled. This past, we drilled last fall. It was a little program that was using subsurface sampling fundamentally, but we did it at the beginning of 3 blizzards, and we eventually got weathered out, and we had equipment issues. So we stopped that program, and as I said, we will return there once we're done drilling at Parbec, and we will be drilling in this area. That is approximately 5 kilometers, and we know it is mineralized between our own data and historic. And we have mineralization over here, and right in here, we have no outcrop we've found yet and a big question mark, but the geophysical and the geological anomaly does continue. So that right there is potential. And then the northern anomaly and the southern, we'll start to work on those. But like I said, our focus is the central area and the 5 kilometers we've outlined. So this slide, I do encourage you to, I think you can get downloads through this format, but if you can't, please go to the website, renforthresources.com, and download this. I'm not going to read this, partly because I'd have to put on my reading glasses, but the purpose of this slide is, it's Dr. Franklin who has made the analogy to the Outokumpu district in eastern Finland. Dr. Franklin is, he's a member of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. He was the chief scientist for the Canadian Geological Survey. He enshrined the exploration techniques for VMS deposits. He definitely knows what he's talking about. So his parallel is Outokumpu, which does share similarities to what we see and what we know about Surimeau to date. It's exciting to have a model to work towards or to draw analogies to. So this is very interesting reading. And you can see that the grades are also comparative to the kind of grades we're seeing currently at Surimeau. So we're very excited about this. Please feel free to read it. Now, I was asked in conversation with one of my neighbors, was I sure Surimeau was there? How did I know? They had read all the historic data and it gave no indication. So one thing to understand is historically being in the 90s, Surimeau was explored in the Victoria West area by Lac Minerals, and prior to that by other groups. Now, Lac was drilling in the lows. Don't really understand their methodology. However, they were definitely looking for gold. Gold, as you're aware, is not magnetic, so it wouldn't appear in a magnetic high, which is what we drilled, but it would appear in a low. So there has been gold recorded at Surimeau. Nothing that was significant enough to get Lac to do follow-on work, but it is there. So they drilled to the south. They were east of where we drilled, and they drilled south out of the anomaly. This drilling up here, actually, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This drilling up here was done in the 60s. We don't know what they were doing. And there's the Lac drilling I just spoke of. So we drilled in between. Here's our drill holes. And we drilled into the mag anomaly. This is the hole that ended in mineralization, and the rig broke down there. So we drilled into the mag high anomaly, which hadn't been done before. And that's how we discovered the coexistence of the ultramafic nickel and the copper zinc VMS. So yes, it's very much there. It was very much a surprise to our neighbors because they had read this data and not seen what we saw in these holes. So it is a discovery. It's a discovery on brownfield ground. Brownfield means we're in the shadow, we're adjacent to operating mines. So it's brownfield exploration, which yielded a discovery. Of course, you know the saying, the best place to find a mine is in the shadow of a head frame, right? Here's what our Surimeau core looks like. This is here to tell you, basically, it shows you that we are seeing the sulphides by eye, with the naked eye. And then we actually put out a press release today, which is not in this presentation yet, I apologize, but we ran comparative assays between aqua regia and 4-acid digestion. We originally ran 4-acid digestion assays on our surface grab samples, largely weathered rock, to get the sample fully broken down to get the best geochemical information we could. However, by fully breaking down the sample, 4-acid digestion can liberate more nickel than conventional processing can liberate. So we then reran those samples using aqua regia digestion. It does not digest silicate nickel. So by a bit of simple math, we're able to determine how much sulphide nickel is within the numbers, and we put that out today. We took 18 samples which had more than 0.1% nickel, and 17 of them gave a population of greater than 40% sulphide nickel, up to 94%, 93 point something percent. Interestingly, Lalonde, the one sample that was assayed from Lalonde, gave us the highest percentage of sulphide nickel. So Victoria was comparable as well. They were both in the 90s. So that tells us we are nickel sulfide. That's important because nickel sulfide can be liberated with conventional processing, fundamentally grinding, flotation, and flocking the nickel out. More cost effective, less environmentally destructive. It's an interesting thing to read that a good portion of the world's nickel right now is coming from some very environmentally costly methodologies in parts of the world, like the laterites in Indonesia. So it's interesting. Indonesia's actually just also banned dumping of tailings into the ocean. Go figure. So it might affect the nickel production worldwide. But sulfide nickel, bottom line, stop blabbing, is sulfide nickel is what we want to have, and it's what we've got. That's not in today's press release. Here are highlights from our drill program, though, and these were interesting. So we only drilled 194 meters, and we have some continuous runs of mineralization. The first hole started pretty much at surface, and 22.25 meters of solid mineralization. The second one gave us 16 and then 31 meters, and the last one gave us 23, then 3 and 1. Not all the core was assayed. The geologists were trying to be fiscally conscious, and of the 194 meters, they elected to not sample 70 meters because they weren't absolutely positive that it would be mineralized. So I've asked that last 70 meters be sampled. It's going to be sampled shortly because we don't have much information, so we may as well get all the information we can from the rock, and I believe that may also resolve some of the sampling gaps, actually, or the mineralization gaps in here. So very consistently mineralized. Numbers, I've had people say to me, well, the numbers aren't that high, but all of these numbers of nickel, given that it's starting at surface, it's road accessible, it's north of a hydroelectric dam, it's near processing availability and operating mines. These numbers are all very interesting nickel numbers. The copper is interesting. I understand from conversation with Dr. Franklin that we're not necessarily in an area of a VMS where we expect to see the best copper numbers yet. Then we have relatively high zinc numbers. So this, for a little 200-meter drill program, this is very interesting, and it certainly warrants follow-up work. We don't know where it's going to go, but it's started off on a good foot. These are our surface samples. You can see the copper on surface, not as robust as it was in the drilling. Nickel or zinc on surface is interesting, but look at this, our nickel on surface, it's still got the same sort of numbers. And this is where we do have some sampling at Colony and at Lalonde. The colony is very interesting because it's the other end of the 20-kilometer anomaly. So we have lots of questions and lots of things to chase down and work up at Surimeau. We look forward to doing it. So, gold in the vault at Parbec. Ultimately, we are backstopped by our Parbec deposit. Parbec deposit, last calculated in May of 2020, is 104,000 indicated ounces at 1.78 grams per ton and 177,000 inferred ounces at 1.77 grams per ton. We're drilling it right now, as I told you. We're drilling it to infill and undercut that, as well as to twin some historic holes, because that May 2020 assay statement or resource statement only talks about drilling from assay values from 2007 to the present. We have all the core from 2007 to today sitting in our core yard, and we were only able to use the assay values from 2007, whereas we did do a good volume of drilling in, I'm going to flip forward to show you something, in the 1980s. Oh, Christ, I can't read that. And you can see that in the 1980s, we get widths and grades as highlights, and in the 90s that are of interest. And these were not included. There's the 90s one. Those were not included in our resource statement. So we are twinning certain historic holes with a view to bringing the 80s and 90s drilling into the resource update to be undertaken in May, June of this year. This image is accurate as of last year. The red lines are the drilling we did prior to Christmas. I haven't updated this for the current drilling. This in blue, this shows our open pit in blue. That's hopefully I'm drawing in black on a black slide. But anyway, the open pit's deepest point is only 225 meters. Does not extend the entire width of the property. And a lot of the drilling in here, you can't really see it in this version, but a lot of the drilling, we drilled on 50-meter centers. So we are tightening our drilling up to be 25-meter spacing, which can impact the overall, the overall assays. It also gives the computer confidence when it models the grade. So infill drilling is important. It tightens up our model and it reduces, it de-risks our model. That's the word I can't find. Undercutting, we're undercutting certain holes. Actually, in this part of the program, we'll undercut holes in the northwest. And undercutting means we're drilling to get a deeper pierce point in the mineralized zone. And then twinning, we literally are twinning holes. We have to collar within 3 to 5 meters of the historic collar and re-drill the hole. Holes wander. They will not actually drill on top of each other, but they'll be very close. The twinning is what we're doing right now, and so far it's going well. Geologically speaking, everything's working out perfectly. We have to assay it. So let me segue. Assaying. We switched labs last year. I went to Val-d'Or with a geologist, and we took 5 big terraform bags of samples from one lab to another right before Christmas, because at that point, we had only seen a couple of our drill holes assays back, and we had started drilling in September. So the new lab is delivering results to us now. They're coming in fits and starts and not in order. So as soon as I have a new complete hole, I'll be press releasing those results. However, last year we drilled 29 holes. We've only press released, we've only received complete assays for 5 of those holes. So we have a backlog of assays from last year to come out. Then we have this year's assays. We just completed our 7th hole last night. 6 have gone to the lab, and then we'll be splitting the remaining Surimeau core as well. So you can look forward to lots of press releases with assays coming sooner than later, hopefully. So this gives you our 27, not 29 holes. Sorry. This gives you our current resource. It tells you some of what we're doing in the current drill program as well. There we are. It excludes approximately 50 holes. We're twinning. Once completed, we will redo the geological model, as I said, and then deliver it to a resource geologist. That'll give us a value for Parbec. Parbec, I have a sneaking suspicion it's gold in a vault, and ultimately that gold in that vault might get sold. It may perform the function of money for us to allow us to continue our focus on our Surimeau asset. So it's interesting. It's self-funding potential. My effort is to reduce dilution, or in fact, hopefully avoid dilution entirely, or for as long as humanly possible. Now, another discovery property. This was a discovery. This was actually a discovery made by SOCAM. SOCAM had the Malartic West property under option for a little while with a mandate that they would find a drill target, and they didn't find it. They also went through a lot of changes at the time, and this sort of fell between the cracks, so I got it back. They didn't disclose to us they had done this, but when we went through the data, our geologists found they made an 8% copper grab sample. That's ludicrous. To make an 8% copper grab sample, you're probably grabbing the tiniest little piece of rock that's entirely 8% by weight of sample copper. So it wasn't a representative grab. Our guys went out and again, I can't see these numbers, nor can I remember them off the top of my head, but we did some grab samples, and the numbers are here that are, 2-3% copper grabs, and then cutting channel samples that are the 0.3, 0.4 copper. But we trace this mineralization over, this is about 165 meters if memory serves. We haven't done much else with it yet. It disappears into overburden. This part of the property is actually a ridge, so it's easy to see. But by over here, we've disappeared into a flat mess of felled trees and overburden. Same thing over here. So we have to do some beat map sampling where we just walk the beat map across what we expect the strike of the mineralization to be to see where it goes. We did discover some other on echelon stuff going on. The geophysics we have available, this is a giant low, so the geophysics isn't very much good. If we can get some joy with the beat map, or when we get a better idea with the beat map, we are probably going to bring the same small mobile track mounted drill out to Malartic West in sometime during the summer to do some subsurface sampling of just some arbitrary drill holes into this so we can see fresh rock, which is exactly what we were doing at Surimeau. We just wanted to see fresh rock. Man, did we see some good fresh rock. Nixon Bartleman, we have not been out here since 2014 when we did this channel, and it got 22.1 grams over 0.3 meters. This is a specimen sample I carry around in my briefcase like a cheesy old school promoter, and I pull out this sample. So you want to see some gold? Anyway, 500 meters of strike on the Nixon Bartleman, on the Dester Porcupine Fault. Dester Porcupine Fault is another major fault. It's not as big as the Cadillac Break, but the Dester Porcupine in this direction hosts the Pan American Silver's Timmins West and Bell Creek Mine, approximately 8 kilometers away. They're operating. And in this direction, we're a couple kilometers away from the Penn Gold property. And I forget the name of the holder. It starts with a G. In any case, active exploration that way on the Dester Porcupine. What's interesting here is we have our mineralization, and we've been out and sampled it. We have on-echelon veining that's also gold-bearing. And we have a regional cross-fault across the Dester Porcupine. And in this area, we have a high-priority golden bark anomaly. It's a fairly arcane geochemical exploration or tool in the exploration toolkit. We need to follow up on it and find bedrock and see what we can see. So we intend to get out to Nixon Bartleman sometime this spring, early summer. Now, a couple slides just to tell you what you already know. World's population continues to increase. I'm sure there's a scary statistic on that. And the population that's also upwardly mobile in terms of standard of living. All of this requires metal. If you can't grow it, you've got to mine it in our world. And the demand for VMS metals in that regard, for lifestyle purposes, infrastructure renewal, rebuilding, a lot of the things we're going to see coming out of the U.S. and ongoing in China, it's going to be be very, very dramatic need. But the one that gets really, really interesting is the demand for nickel in the electric vehicle. If we're going to look, I personally believe we need to look at doing some green measures to, just to reduce our impact on the planet. And the electrification of mobility is one of those things that can be done. And I think we'll start to see done. Now, it's not just nickel. The use of all metals, both in terms of the batteries in the cars and just the cars, an electric vehicle consumes far more metal than a conventional engine. So I think we're going to see the rise of electric vehicles, and the outlook for metals in that regard, I think, is positive as well. So that's really the purpose of these two slides. However, you can find this information anywhere. But I do think we're going to see various commodity cycles grow. So last slide, board of directors. It's not just me, advisors, technical advisors. There's one not on here, my father. He's an exploration geologist who discovered a blind copper ore body in Spain and reopened a mine. But he's around all the time, at least in my world. The board, independent directors, they're all independent directors, actually. CFO Kyle and myself. You can always reach me, my cell phone, my email. Issued and outstanding. I'm hoping that the only dilution we see going forwards is options or warrants as they expire, but if they don't expire, as they go into the money and they get exercised. So that brings me 33 minutes into this to the end of the presentation. And whilst I think there probably is stuff I've forgotten to tell you, I don't have any of it off the top of my head because I forgot to tell you. So any questions, John?
Maybe it'll come up in the questions. You never know. Thank you.
You never know.
Yeah, there are a few questions. So we'll start here. Agnico Eagle Mining or Yamana and or Canadian Malartic seem like a natural buyer for Parbec, but are you talking to any other potential buyers to help maximize the realized price you get for that asset?
Yes. I maintain open communication with other potential people who potentially need ounces in the camp. I do have a completely different side note is I have a couple of investment bankers floating around who are more than happy to do M&A work and find a buyer and set up a bidding war for Parbec, but it's not the time yet. Agnico's outright told me they're waiting for this resource restatement to be completed for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they know that in my head I've already completed it, so I won't talk to anyone on the basis of the current resource estimate. But as well, the twinning of the drill holes de-risks the property significantly for Agnico Eagle for their internal purposes. I'm not concerned about the twinning. The geologist, our head geologist, actually did the drilling. It's one of his first jobs in the 80s. We'll just say in the mid to late 80s. He's not that old. I hope he's not watching. But he did the work. So I have no doubt that the technical work's going to hold up. It's going to come down to rerunning the assays because, of course, assay methodologies have changed. The labs have changed. So we'll see how the assays hold up. So circular way of answering that question, yes, I do talk to other people. However, this is very much an issue that's not going to move forward until we have a new resource estimate. My hope is that resource estimate gets close to what our old ones were, in any case in the vicinity of the 500,000 ounce mark, or within a shooting distance of it.
Okay. I actually was going to ask that question, so there you go. You already answered it. The scale size of your Surimeau property is obviously a good thing, but it seems like it could be a daunting task to explore for a small junior. Will you be looking to bring in a partner for this particular project that could help you manage the costs of exploration and discovery?
Interesting question. As I tried to outline, we are fairly well funded internally between the potential cash flow from selling Parbec and the cash and securities on hand. Of course, that money will ultimately get spent at some point, but not quickly. To be clear, I can very much control the spending within the company, and there's no rush. The metals aren't going anywhere. However, we're starting to see some interesting things happen in that there is a side to the industrial metals, let's call them industrial, strategic critical metals, blah, 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 non-gold metals. There's a side where the people who use those metals get involved as owners of the property. So the end user becomes a partner and or owner. They can step up with funding. Trading houses like to own deposits because they then trade on the backstop of the metals that they have in the ground as well. So there's lots of permutations down the road that could come to fruition for Surimeau. It's in the distance a bit. I will do work on Surimeau to get a better handle on what we have, because I wouldn't go to a negotiating table blind as to the potential of the asset. But as well, that negotiating table could very much host entities other than other, junior mining companies for sure. Or, we could host much larger mining companies. But there's a far broader audience for a property like Surimeau than there is for a strictly gold property.
Okay. So it sounds like you'd be open to a partner down the road, but need to do a little bit of work to really get a better idea what you have first. Before
we try to deal on it, we'll get a better idea of what it is.
Okay. Next question from Barry Allen, analyst at Laurentian Bank Securities. He's asking, could you explain a beat map? It seems to be a Quebec-based survey method.
Oh, actually it was. I met the fellow whose dad founded it and built it. It's a little mag unit that it looks like a skateboard fundamentally, like a little sled that you tow, and it gives you it reads. I think, Barry, it's something like 3 meters they quote, but it gives you a reading immediately subsurface. So it's good for working under just sloppy cover at places like Malartic. We ran it a little while ago. We actually used it at Parbec, and we did some sampling in the sediments. And those samples gave us numbers because there's an element of sulphide, which was magnetic. So it's an interesting technique, and it literally gets dragged behind the geologist. He ties it around his waist, and he's got the receiver in hand, and he can see what the mag signal is doing. And when it crosses a certain threshold, it literally beeps, hence the awkward name Beep Mat. But you do see it used elsewhere, but it's actually invented in the Abitibi, no less.
There you go, homegrown technology, very cool.
Yep.
Richard's asking, can you please discuss your overall ownership profile and target investors? Any plans to list in the U.S.?
Okay. Not sure how to answer overall ownership profile unless the only thing I'll speak to is what's public, in that Radisson made the investment at 13.5 cents, and they hold 24 million shares of Renforth. There are a couple other companies that, to my knowledge, do hold shares, but I'm not sure the public status of those ownerships. So whilst there's at least 3 others, they're not. They're held for investment purposes. Myself, it's around 8.4 million shares, I believe. I believe our CFO holds just under 8 million shares. There are several private entities that hold in the kind of 7 to 10 million share buckets. But the structure of the company is retail. That's deliberate. I wanted to deal with retail investors, and they consistently and loyally kept funding the company. We have a very concentrated and deep Quebec shareholder base around Val-d'Or, around the northeast of Quebec, and around Montreal. Funds, there may still be one flow-through fund holding shares, but I expect they've probably sold them by now. U.S. listing, the part of that question, that is underway. I expect that process will be concluded in the next couple of weeks. That's the OTCQB, to mature the call market, however you describe the listing we have in the U.S. right now. And what was the third part of that question? My target? What was that?
Your target investors. I think you've kind of covered it, Nicole. Your target is retail.
It's retail. And in fact, I as I stated, between the cash securities and the value of Parbec on hand, I'm hoping to not raise money for easily 6 months easily, if not 12 to 18 months or longer. Who knows? If Parbeck's sold, it diametrically changes the financial situation. And in that case, I'm not targeting any investor. It'll be whoever buys the stock in the public market. So I'm hoping to not raise money again.
Okay. So I'm guessing Richard, when he asked overall ownership, he was maybe talking about as well, like percentage owned by management and insiders. You've kind of given some numbers, Nicole. I don't know how that works out a percentage. It sounds like Radisson would be just slightly below 10% ownership, would be the single largest owner.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So 250 million shares outstanding, Richard, if you were curious.
Yeah, both Kyle and I are sitting. I mean, I'm not going to do the math, but it's between 3 and 5%. That's the amount of math I'm doing today.
Okay. Need to drink more coffee, Nicole.
Don't worry, I'm on it.
You're almost out. Okay. Next question from Lars. The gold price is falling. How important is a high gold price to Renforth? How dependent is Renforth on the gold price? I don't know if he's speaking with respect to, getting a good price on the asset.
Right. Well, Renforth's incredibly frustrated by the gold price and hence thrilled to have other commodities to look at other than solely gold with Surimeau. However, how sensitive are we? We're an exploration company, but what I can tell you is the neighbors are all, I believe, the last time I looked, all the all-in sustaining costs are floating at no more than 1,000 and change in the area. The highest would probably be IM Gold, but the majors, the producing mines in Canada are making money hand over fist right now. They're making money. Their cost base is in Canadian dollars. The commodity in Canadian dollars is significantly higher, expressed in Canadian dollars than U.S. But if they're selling it in U.S. and taking payment in U.S. dollars, they're making money on the currency as well. So, I mean, the miners are all making money right now. The price of gold, whilst it would be lovely to have it be much higher, and there are some crazy forecasts out there, where it sits right now is, don't forget, gold not that long ago was at like $1,100, and these guys all tightened their belts and drove their all-in sustaining, their cost at mine costs way down. So they're reaping the benefit now. So Price of gold's fine, could always be better.
I'm sure most people attending our conference would love the price of gold to go up. Maybe some people taking advantage as a buying opportunity. You never know. Next question from Ross. You've kind of covered one part of it. He was asking about details and timeline of OTC registration, graduating from the pink. So you've already mentioned that Renforth is. I'm
waiting on. I can't give a better timeline. I'm waiting on the finalization of the process. I'm given to understand it's any time now, but it's been any time now for about a week. I don't know where the authorities that we are waiting on are actually based. I do know there's a lot of funky things going on in the States right now with power supply and weather and people working remotely with COVID. So, it's going to be any week now. I'm thinking we're inside of 2 weeks, but I truly don't know.
Okay. And another part of Ross's question, would you consider perhaps a reverse stock split, higher per share value to attract more investors to boost the share price?
Nope. No, I think like a shareholder. I have yet to see it work. I've had, actually this came up most recently with another investment banker. And I think like a shareholder. I have not seen a reverse stock split, which is a fancy way of saying consolidation, which is what it is, work to the benefit of the shareholder. At best, the only person that benefits in a consolidation is whomever does the financing immediately after the consolidation and the bankers who get paid fees for dreaming it up and then doing the paperwork. I believe, the assets we have merit. I believe they will attract attention, and the stock is sitting where it is, but I refuse to consolidate without a massive transactional reason which would really transform the company, just to satisfy brokers whom I speak to saying we need fewer shares outstanding. If I'm not raising money, which I've always done myself anyway, I don't have to deal with the brokers who want the consolidation just for the sake of a consolidation. It's just the reality. The people that got us here to this point to have a gold deposit, the likes of which is world-class in the ground, and then to have an incredibly large-scale new discovery, and then a little baby new discovery. All those people that got us here, I'm not just handing it back to them with a consolidation, which typically only serves to take money out of their pocket. So, personally, I'm adamantly against it.
Okay, so pretty definitive answer there for you, Ross.
Very definitive.
Yeah,
comes up over and over again.
Yeah, you're right, Nicole. It often doesn't work out. I actually have seen it work out a few times, but probably the majority of the time, it certainly does.
It's got to be transformative, and there has to be some real support in the market behind it.
Okay.
So we don't have a transformative instance upon which to base it, i.e. an amalgamation with another company. Is typically where you see it happen, or with a takeover and a divestment of assets, and then the balance of the assets rolled out into a new company with a much smaller shareholding number of shares out. But that sort of thing's not on the horizon right now. So just doing it out of the blue for the sake of doing it, no.
Okay. Question here from Dan. I've seen values of $100 to $150 per ounce of gold and ground quoted by other Quebec explorers at Cartier. Is there an appropriate range when doing back of the napkin calculations on Parbec?
Well, I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I've also heard those kind of numbers. I mean, I think the number that's more realistic in terms of somebody writing a check is in the $25 to $75 per ounce in the ground. I'm shooting for $50 per ounce in the ground, but it's all very relative, and there are a lot of inputs into that number. You know, desire, location. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that informs that number. So whilst it's lovely to say this is a number and that's what we're worth, and the market just doesn't understand it, at the end of the day, if I sit down to sell Parbec, the number I'm shooting for is $50 per ounce in the ground, just based on my own personal interpretation of a number of transactions I've seen. Of course, there will be other mines brought to bear when we get to that point, and that number may shift. But for my own purposes right now, I use $50.
Okay. So, Nicole, you kind of touched on it earlier. Do you have a hope in mind with respect to how many ounces the new resource estimate could put out
I'm hoping it gets us in the 500,000 range, yeah.
Okay.
Plus minus, but in that range.
Okay. And I mean, the nice thing along the lines of Dan's question, I guess you certainly are in the right neighborhood. You've got a lot of big neighbors that are looking for ounces, for cheap, easy to access, ounces.
Yes, on their terms. So we just have to get their terms and our terms to align.
There you go. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I guess we can cut it off there unless anything comes in last minute. Nicole, thank you very much for your time today, for joining us, and interesting presentation. Really interested to see how things work out at Surimeau. It's got some major scale there for sure. So
it does. Surimeau's got incredible scale potential. Lots of interesting things to chase down. Parbec, it almost became rote to put out more gold assays and more gold assays. With every hole to date that I've drilled has given us gold at Parbec. And we'll continue. We'll continue with the drilling. We'll pivot to drill to Surimeau. Stay tuned with our website or social media. Facebook, there's a shareholders group on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, sort of. And you can join our newsletter on the website.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Nicole.